Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari. This is Great Big History Podcast. In this episode, we do industrialization. Industrialization is the replacement of muscle power with machine power. That instead of your body, the human body, or even animal labor, animal muscle, doing the labor, machines will be doing the labor. And humans will work with the machine. But the mass of the production will be done by the machine. Now, why does this matter? Because it is the largest and best change for humanity since agriculture. And being in the early 21st century, we can debate about if all the good things that have happened, but we live in a modern world affected by industrialization. The difference between the industrialized world, the 30 or so countries that are industrialized in the world, and the 170 or so countries that aren't, is just massive in every way. It is the largest and best change for humanity since agriculture. It changes how people live. It changes their societies. It changes their relations with each other. It changes everything. There is a before and an after industrialization, and it pulls billions by the 21st century out of subsistence poverty. Agriculture got people away from having to find food. So it gave them stability. It gave them a little bit of money. But it was subsistence. You got by. You had a little bit. What industrialization allows people to do is actually save, make, and own something that they never could before. Why? Why does this happen? Because what industrialization does is allow a massive increase in productivity, in production. You get much cheaper goods. Take a look. Go to Wegmans. Go to Walmart. Look at the stuff that exists. Look at the stuff you could buy for $1. All those candy bars. All the soap. All the chemicals. All the fabrics. All the clothes, which are like the killer app of industrialization, was clothes. Cheaper goods equals more stuff. You can buy more stuff. Look in your closet and how many things you own that you don't use. How many iPhones have you had? How many iPads? How many pairs of shoes do you have that you don't wear anymore? You didn't used to own that. You had 2 pairs of clothes. You had your work clothes and you had your Sunday church clothes. You had your wedding clothes. And so with industrialization, people were able to buy stuff. They were finally able to afford things. And more stuff equaled better living. You could have more food for cheaper. You'd have more clothes for cheaper. So you were able to increase your happiness. 2 is urbanization. People move to the cities. Cities explode. The first one is London. London becomes a city of 1 million people. Paris will follow. Later will be New York. Chicago. Factories needed to be near transportation, which we'll talk about in a second. Factories needed to be near transportation. They also needed to be near people because you needed people to go and work at them. And so cities become the place you put your factories, which then brings people in to go and work at those factories. And so cities expand. Urbanization also allows for transportation. Up until this point, roads are terrible. Roads are awful. The building of roads really hadn't happened since the Roman Empire in any kind of mass infrastructure building kind of way. And so you get the start of roads, but you really get the start of railroads The roads are so bad they build railroads to just cut right through mountains, cut right over rivers, just cut right through to get from A to B. So transportation ties the rural, where a lot of the stuff is, the minerals, the animals, the farm food, to the urban. And so for the first time, regions are tied together economically in a way they weren't before. You used to have to ship, this is why London is on the Thames, or Paris on the Seine. You used to have to ship your food to Paris or London by river. You put it on a riverboat, you go down. That's why there's lots of canals in southeastern England. Lots of canals so that you could ship to London. Now the railroad's going to cut right through that. Do it faster. So the cities expand with people. And that's a new start for a lot of people. What's the attraction of the city? And we're going to talk about negatives, but what's the attraction? The attraction is it's new. It's a new start. You break those old bonds. You know, you used to be a farmhand. You were a pig poop picker in your small town. You were only ever going to be the pig poop picker. Who are you going to marry? You're going to marry a person who thinks the pig poop picker is a good job, right? So, if you're one of the farm owners, if you're one of the leading men in town, a rural place is fine. If you're their daughters or their wives, it's fine. It's good living. But if you're a man or a woman who wants something more, the rural countryside doesn't have it. It's the opposite of the Hallmark Christmas movies. The Hallmark Christmas movies start with someone in the big city and they're soulless and they're like, oh, my life sucks. I'm going to go back to the small town I came from. Well, there's a reason they left that small town. They turned 19 and they were like, I'm leaving because this place sucks. There's nothing to do. There's no one to do it with. There's a ceiling on how high. You're never going to own the general store. You're not going to be a lawyer in your small town. There's already a lawyer. There's two lawyers. There's the defense one and the prosecution one. And done. Like, To Kill a Mockingbird, how many other lawyers are in town with Atticus Finch? You think there's a lot? I don't know if any are mentioned. There's a whole lot of farmers. But how many lawyers are there? How many judges? So there's a ceiling in the rural countryside that people leave. And if you're different, if you're gay, if you're trans, if you're Joe Marsh in Little Women, if you're just a woman who wants more than this provincial life, like Belle, you can't stay in the countryside. And so the urban allows for a new start. It breaks those old bonds. You go to the city and you're anonymous. You're new. You're whatever you want to be. You can drop that accent. I mean, Dickens has like novel after novel after novel of this. People going to the city and they start over. They become Pygmalion, right? The story of the play Pygmalion. Or is it My Fair Lady became the musical? Is you take the poor woman and you can make her into all of the things that make you act like you're rich. You can act rich. You can sound rich. And the rich people will accept you because you look and you sound like them. So you could break those old bonds in the city. You could start over. If you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. It's Mary Tyler Moore in the 70s. I mean, we're still talking about this in the 70s in America, that you could go to the city and start over. And for Mary Tyler Moore, that's Minneapolis. It's not New York or Chicago. But the city, any city, will break those old bonds. Skilled labor made money. If you could fix the machines, if you invented the machines, if you were an architect, if you were someone for which there was a new job, an accountant, where knowledge mattered. You were a actuary, so you had to figure out the rates, the insurance rates. Education mattered. And if education mattered, you were skilled, you could make money. And this is better opportunities for both men and women. Because wealthier women whose fathers had money, could get an education too. They were already getting some kind of education because they wanted to marry men with educations. And so to make them, like you look at the Bennett sisters in Pride and Prejudice, they're all educated. They've all had some form of schooling. It's not the same formal schooling as boys, but it's still a formal schooling. Elizabeth Bennet is always with a book. She's always reading. She knows her classics. She is able to speak with any of the rich boys on the same level. Well, now that you're getting into a knowledge economy, industrialization still has massive machines doing the work, and the vast majority of jobs are going to be working with those machines. They're going to be unskilled labor. But on top of that is this percentage of increasing jobs. There used to be a lot of government jobs, and then they were financial jobs. But now they're increasing. They're increasing as people have to fix those machines. People now have to find the resources to feed those machines. So these are not labor intensive. You do work, but they're not labor. Your body isn't laboring for this. It's mind now. A woman could be an actuary. A woman can do insurance charts just as well as a man, if not better. And so these are opportunities for men and for women. So skilled labor. If you had an education, you did better. And so the people who are today telling people, oh, you don't need to go to college. Not everybody needs to go to college. They're sending their kids to college. So, wait a minute. Why would they be telling you not to go to college? It's selfishness. It's, I don't want to pay for it, but I want my kids to have the benefit. For the last 200 years, in fact, forever, as far back as the Greeks, education always made you better. Education was always an investment worth investing in. It's this thing people buy. The first thing they buy when they get any kind of money is improvement in themselves and then their children. And if they're too old to invest in the improvement in themselves, they always invest in their children's improvement through education. Always. It's the first thing people spend money on. Beyond the basics, beyond food and shelter and clothing, they get a little bit of extra money. It's always education. I mean, the Romans raided all of Greece and just picked up the professors and brought them to Rome. They're like, we don't have time to make our own education system. Just bring the smart people in. Education always improves people, and people always want their children to have it. So the moment someone ever tells you, not everybody needs to go to college, just tell them, stop. Be quiet. Because the skills you learn, whether they are laboring skills, whether they are technical skills, whether they are humanity skills or thinking skills, they are always the key to more money, better jobs, less labor, more stability. Always in history. And we see this. If you're on the video, you see the real wages for London skilled workers. That starting from 1800 is a climb. It's a climb. And then 1900, it practically goes straight up for what you make. Whereas from 1200 to 1800, it stayed the same. It goes up a little bit, it goes down a little bit, but that depends on nature. That depends on the price of corn. Wages for skilled workers because mostly what you're selling your labor to, so you're a blacksmith, you're a skilled labor, but you can only sell, you're stuck limited by what the cost of the things you have to buy for, but you're also limited by who can buy your stuff. You can't just charge the farmers whatever you want, because one, you know them, and two, they're limited by the price of corn, the price of wheat. So if they have a bad year, they're going to come to you and say, I need horseshoes. And it's been a bad year. I don't have the money. I can give you $5 per horseshoe. And you say either no, and then you make an enemy in town, or you say, of course. And in a better year, and he says, yes, in a better year, I'll give you more. But right now, I need the horseshoes, and I don't have it. So there's just no market for skilled labor, or it's a limited market. So now with industrialization, the labor goes up. You make money. What are the problems? The problems are that only rich people could have money for the education. There's no public education. The Bennetts are rich women. They live on a manor. They're going to marry rich men. And so they get a monopoly. So rich people get a monopoly on the good jobs. The dandies. The dandies aren't poor. They can afford these wonderful suits and all of this great clothing and the awesome hairstyles that take hours to shave and carve and make. Education was for the rich. And we're not even talking college education, like university, like Oxford, Cambridge, Princeton, Harvard. Like less than 2% of Americans went to college in 1930 or so. Only the rich had money for the education, which meant they had a monopoly on the good jobs. So they become a caste. Education became a caste. The people who go to Harvard are usually related to people who went to Harvard. They're a caste. The machines do the labor. So the second problem is the machines do the labor. So if you're unskilled labor, if you have no education, if you can't read and write, your labor skills, your wages crash because you are easily replaced. See, in the rural countryside, you're a pig poop picker. But how many people are there to be pig poop pickers? You've got a small town of 1,000 people. So you have your judge, you have your lawyer, you have your mayor, right? You have your general store guy, you have a bunch of farmers. But for a farmer to get richer, they need to farm more land. But without machines, with just you and your horse, without engines doing the job for you, you were limited by how much you could do, how much acreage you could do. Probably about 50 to 100 acres. So if you want to do more than that, the only way to get richer as a farmer was plow more land. So the only way to do more than that was to hire laborers. Now, if you're in America, you could hire slaves, not hire them, buy slaves to do the work for you. But that brought its own problems. But right now, we're really dealing with post-slavery industrialization, post-1865 industrialization. And so you'd have to hire a laborer to do your job, right? Now, your wife can do some jobs, and your kids, the little kids, could do some jobs. But you're limited by how many people there are, because who wants to be a pig poop picker? Nobody. They'd rather be a farmer. That's respectable. They'd rather own land, have dignity. And so even in the unskilled jobs, there's a limited amount of labor available. So that gave a floor to their wages, because there's just not a lot of competition in rural England, rural France, to do low-skilled, crappy jobs. And in the cities of industrialization, though, people are flooding into the cities looking for jobs, looking to make money. And now there's competition. There's competition to push the button. Because now your job is not being a pig poop picker. It's a red button pusher. So when that red button lights up, you push it. Boop, 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 boop. Because the machine's doing the work, you just have to run the machine. So you go boop, boop, boop. Well, if you don't show up to work, that machine may not work. So are they going to stop? No, they're going to get somebody else to push that button. Boop, boop, boop. But how long does it take to learn when and how to push the button? And you were easily replaced. And because you were easily replaced, why do I have to pay these people? And so their wages just crash. This is why you have to have a minimum wage. The people who are like, oh, the minimum wage it hurts poor people because now you can't sell your labor for what you want. Bullshit. I'm sorry, but bullshit. Because what will happen is people will sell their labor for as cheap as they can because poor people need a job. They've got bills they must pay, food they must eat. So they will sell their labor for as low as possible. So you will have people back working not $7 an hour. You will have people working for $1 an hour in McDonald's. Easy. It'll take a month, and the wage will crash. We could see it. If you're unskilled labor, you're easily replaced. So you're willing to work for nothing. Well, where do you live? In these new cities, these expanding cities, you live in the worst places. You live in places with people who are also unskilled labor. And so you get the invention of the ghetto, the slum. This replaces the quarter. In cities in the Middle Ages, you had quarters. Now, they didn't actually mean fourths, but they meant this is the area. They may have at a time meant, they divided the city up into 4 parts and each one was a quarter. But you would have the industrial quarter and the living quarter and the Jewish quarter and the Italian quarter. You would have these sections where things congregated, like things congregated. Now you're getting the ghetto and the slum. And that's replacing these quarters because what you're getting is urban living with no services, no cops, no water, no roads, no cleaning up of the roads, no government services, no services. It's just stuff. It's just people on top of people on top of people. Now, these people can buy stuff. Remember, industrialization is creating cheap things, but there's no dignity. So you can own stuff, but there's no dignity. And who are you going to marry? You're going to marry another poor laborer. Who are your kids going to marry? And so the slum, the ghetto, becomes a caste. Think about how people talk about the hood, the ghetto, the slum. The word they use for success. I'm successful. I grew up in the hood. I grew up in the ghetto. I grew up in the slum. And I became successful. And what's the next words? The next words are, I got out. They got out. We got out. It's the Tracy Chapman song, Fast Car. It's we'll get out. We're poor. We're stuck here. Success means not staying. So what you have is successful people leave. They go to the rich neighborhoods. So that ghetto, that slum, that hood never gets better. Because as poor people come in looking for work and doing whatever job they can get, they end up in the slum, the ghetto, right? And so the people who are successful leave. They don't stay and make the ghetto better. The ghetto never changes. And so it becomes a caste. The people may change, but the area doesn't change until the modern world, the 21st century, where you get gentrification, where rich people look at the slum and the ghetto and they say, I like those buildings, but I don't want to live with those people. I like that area. I like its nearness to something. So all we have to do is move those people out. And that's gentrification, where rich people move into poor neighborhoods and push poor people out. And they don't leave it as a slum or a ghetto or the hood, because they then spend their excess money to fix everything up to make it a rich person's neighborhood. This is why the people living in Long Island City didn't want Amazon to show up in Long Island City, because the people who are living in Long Island City won't be able to live in Long Island City anymore. They will be pushed out by people coming in making $150,000 a year. Poof. And where are they going to go? Where are they going to go? And so you get the people on Twitter being like, oh, New Yorkers, you're so stupid. AOC, you're an idiot. These are all good jobs. Not to the people of the neighborhood, they're not. Because they're not getting those jobs. Some poor kid with a high school education is not getting a $150,000 programming job at Amazon. But his three-story apartment building will be bought by one of those people, gutted, made into a loft space, and then sold for $4,000 a month. And so you see the churn. The problem is, for poor people, it is toil and a lack of dignity in early industrialization. It is churning. The capitalism is bringing people in, and it is using them and churning them out. Third is pollution. Industrialization is massive pollution. Rivers are on fire. There's the London fog. Now, London fog sounds cool. There's actually a Mad Men episode where they talk about London fog and how a brand name, it's great. And how if you read your Dickens, London is always, or your Tennyson, the poetry of Tennyson, the novels of Dickens, the poetry of Tennyson is that there's always this haze, this dark haze. Well, that's the coal dust in the air that people are constantly breathing. Because they're using it in the factories, they're using it for heat. And coal is incredibly dirty. And so you had London fog. You could not see 20 feet in front of you, 100 feet in front of you. But that was all pollution, because London doesn't get natural fog. It was pollution. And so if you look at the art of the late 19th century, you get these artists, and it's a lot of impressionism, but you get English artists who do the impressionism, and you get these crazy sunset colors. How? Why? What kind of sunset looks like that? Well, a sunset that you see through pollution. And so you're getting impressionist painters who are not now tied to realism, and they're like, well, I'm going to paint kind of what I see, and what I see is this haze, this sunset through haze. And it's beautiful. But when you realize that what you're seeing it through is pollution, that's crazy. It's the Chinese, it's the Beijing Olympics in 2008. That the air in Beijing was so dirty. The air right now in 2020 in New Delhi is so dirty that it's killing people. One of my lectures from another historian I have is the average life expectancy in London was 17 years of age. It was 40, 45 in the countryside, but it was 17 in London in the late 19th century. So if you lived in London, you were dying because of the pollution. You get rivers on fire. You get garbage everywhere, because now the industrialization is producing more than people can buy. But it doesn't stop producing. It just keeps producing. And so you now get stuff everywhere. It's us, and it's 2020 and all of the bottles in the ocean. It's the giant garbage patch in the Pacific. That is tens, hundreds of miles, thousands of miles, I don't know, tens of miles, hundreds of miles wide. And it's all full of plastic. And we make more. Wawa never runs out of bottled water. Never. I have gone to many a Wawa, and there is always more. Always more. Always more. So there's pollution. Industrialization is making people rich, but it's at the cost of nature. There's also crime. You put poor people together, you put a lot of people together who don't know each other, and you get crime. And this scares the upper classes because they're waiting for it to happen to them. They're overwhelmed. There's much more poor people than there are rich people. There always was. And so rich people are always afraid of poor people. Always. But if you live in the small county of 1,000 people, you knew people. So you didn't have to really worry about them. And you could bribe them to keep the peace. So you fund the school play. You fund the Christmas party, right? You fund the church picnic. And then people look at you and go, oh, Mr. Rich Man, you're wonderful. And you go, yes, I know I am. Yes, yes, yes. And you don't have to worry about it because people like you. And it didn't cost you very much money. You know? You pick up drinks at the you pay off people's bar tab at the local pub. Right? Then people will, quote, owe you one. You know, it didn't cost you much. It cost you $1,000. But it got rid of all the regular people's tabs. So when they come in, they're like, oh, I got to pay my tab. And they're like, oh, no, Mr. Rich Man paid for it. Oh, well, that's nice of him. Oh, yes, well, you know, charity and all. But in the city, in the urban area where you don't know people, that guy on the street corner could mug you. The woman who's going to walk up to you and flirt with you in the subway, she's not flirting with you because she wants to get with you. She's flirting with you because the child behind you, is picking your pocket. People now need money in a city, especially in a way they don't in the countryside. In countryside, you're poor, but you could get by on a lot of credit. Because remember, the farming is seasonal. It's flood and bust. It's the harvest brings in a whole lot of money all at once. So it's a lot of credit. Cities don't work like that because people don't know each other. You also get you get the social crimes, drugs, for women, prostitution. Because for women, prostitution was the one job an unskilled woman could do that could feed her and her children without any skills. It's really the one job that she could definitely do. And we watch Fantine in Les Mis do it. Fantine goes from working class, poor, but stable, quote unquote, factory worker to dead from tuberculosis in 4 songs. Right? At the end of the day, we're introduced to Fantine. Right? Lovely ladies. She has been fired from her job, and now she's wandering the streets of Paris with nothing to do, no money. She doesn't know what to do, and in come the prostitutes being like, girl, you're one of us. She sells all of her possessions, and when she has nothing left, she ends with she'll sell her body. Then we have I Dreamed a Dream, which is she's a prostitute. She hates her life. She's dying. And there was a boy who said he was going to marry her. They had a child together, and now she's a prostitute. Her life has turned to garbage. In 3 songs. In 3 songs. We're talking 6 minutes. And then there's Confrontation, which is a man's song where she dies. Where Jean Valjean promises, I will take care of your daughter. I will find her. It's my fault that you're dead. Well, yeah, he didn't care. Oh, now he's going to get he owned the factory. Now he's going to get morality. He's going to get ethics. He's going to get a soul. Now, when he's finally forced to confront what his capitalism, what his wealth does. And so, in 4 songs, Fantine goes from poor but stable to dead from tuberculosis, and in the middle, she's a prostitute. And this is the downward spiral for women. That's always there. And it's the one thing that women could do, the one job unskilled women could do. And so there's these crimes that are poverty crimes. They're the crimes of poverty. Even the drugs. The drugs are a crime of there's rich people doing drugs, the opium stuff, but there's also the crime of my life sucks and I don't want to feel bad. There's the bored rich kids doing drugs, but then there's the poor people in their depression who just don't want to feel bad. And these are these social crimes. You also get people think there's more crime than there is because you get the newspaper. And the newspaper is the new realism. We're going to show you what the world really is. You can't understand the city. It's too big. You can't understand all that's going on. In the small town, you could. You can know what Mrs. Felch is doing and what Mr. Feldman is doing. And you could know the guy. And there was a town gossip. Well, the town gossip's the newspaper in a small town. Because that woman or man will tell you all the things you need to know. Well, in the city, you don't have that. And so what you need is some way of navigating what's going on. And here comes the newspaper. And if it bleeds, it leads. The newspaper knows people's fear sells better than their hopes. And so we're going to tell you either 1, things that make you mad, or 2, things that scare you. And we're going to put it in pictures. Photography is a big part of this. We're going to put it in pictures. We're going to, because that's real. We're going to have people write, not flowery language. We're going to write in a very crisp, very get to the point kind of language. It's going to tell you what you need to know. Because, man, you don't have time to read the newspaper. You're on your way to work. You're in the subway. You got, 20 minutes. So things have to be boom, boom, boom. Right to the point. Hemingway will eventually take this kind of writing and put it into novels. But for a while, for these 50 years, 75 years, you get the separation of novels into the Henry James very florid language, because the novel is something you read when you've got time, when you're in your leisure, when you want to be entertained. Or the newspaper is, I need to know something on my way somewhere else. You get the Dickens novels. Many of Dickens novels is put into newspapers, is serialized in newspapers. And this is the gritty novel. This is the hard scrabble life. This is urban decay. It's people trying to move up. It's people collapsing down. It is Dickensian. It is the struggle of the masses to get better. But look at the social turmoil that's in A Christmas Carol, right? You have this guy who is so rich, Ebenezer Scrooge, who's so rich, and he has a couple workers. He's got Bob Cratchit working for him, a couple other guys working for him, and Bob Cratchit lives in a totally different neighborhood, in a totally little house, and he's got 3 or 4 kids, no health care, and their Christmas is one present. They don't have anything. And he's thankful. And everything's just like, what the hell is he thankful? Because he's thankful because he knows that underneath him is the whole group of people who don't even have that job, who don't have that stability, who don't even have that chicken for Christmas. He's thankful because his daughters aren't prostitutes and don't have to become prostitutes. Now, they're not far away from it. should Cratchit die, they're in a lot of trouble. But right then, they're okay. They've pulled themselves up. They're above that. And that is Dickens, is this so close to disaster. So what's the solutions to this? People see this. People are reading Dickens. People are reading newspapers. The middle classes are scared. Their solution to being scared is to create the police, is to hire poor people to beat up other poor people. The early police is not, they'll become the middle class, but what you do is you take poor people in the poor neighborhood, you pay them better than they would make as other poor people in order to separate them from the poor people. But then you have them beat up the poor people. You have them police the poor people. So rich people pay poor people to police poor people. Do you see how this works? And then the police don't want to live with the poor people because they're making more money. And so they move out of the ghetto, the slum, the hood, right? Even though they have to go back into it to work, they live outside of it. And so they start to feel different. And there's your start of your middle classes. Your public employees become your middle classes. Your middle managers become your middle classes because they're not rich, but they also do not think of themselves as poor.